Unemployment. To better understand unemployment, we need to look at some labor force statistics. Generally, these labor force statistics are produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Labor. Um, Generally speaking, based on regular surveys of 60,000 households, and based on the quote unquote adult population, which is folks that are 16 years or older. The BLS divides the population into three groups: the employed, the unemployed, and those not in the labor force. The employed are paid employees. They could be self employed or unpaid workers in a family business as well. So, paid employees, the self employed, and unpaid workers in a family business. I grew up on a farm and certainly worked after I was 16 as an unpaid worker in the family business on the family farm. There are the unemployed, people not working who have looked for work within the previous 4 weeks. So within the previous month, they've been looking for a job, but they're unemployed. They can't find one. And then there's those that are not in the labor force. That's everyone else. That's everyone else that's left over. The labor force is the total number of workers, including the employed and the unemployed. The labor force, I should point out, does not include those who are not looking for a job. So those that are not in the labor force are not counted in as a part of the labor force. Now, the unemployment rate and the labor force participation are two very simple calculations we make. The unemployment rate, sometimes called the U rate, more times than not just called simply the unemployment rate, is the percent of the labor force, again those looking for a job, that is unemployed. Okay, so the unemployment rate equals the number of unemployed over the total number in the labor force, and we multiply that by 100 to get um, a whole percentage number instead of getting say 0.08064. We can get 8.06 as an answer. So that's what we multiply by 100. So if you got 5% unemployment, you instead of expressing that as 0.05, you want to express it by 5, so 5%. That's why you multiply by 100. Now, the labor force participation rate is the percent of the adult population that is in the labor force. So those 16 and over that are actively looking for jobs and perhaps don't have them, or actually actively working a job. So again, the labor force are those that are employed and those that are unemployed but looking for work. So labor force participation rate is the percent of the adult population that is in the labor force. So again, the labor force divided by the total adult population over the age of 16, again, multiplied by 100 for percentage terms. So many of the following slides abbreviate unemployment rate as the U rate to reduce slide clutter. So just keep that in mind. We're going to call unemployment rate the U rate. You'll hear me verbally say it, but if you see it on a slide, I don't want you to get confused. And you can use it in your notes to reduce your burden as you're taking notes as we go along. So let's take an active learning activity here and let's calculate labor force statistics. Let's compute the labor force, the unemployment rate, the adult population, and the labor force participation rate using the following data. There's adult population in the U.S. by group as of September 2013. There are 144.3 million employed workers. There are 11.3 million unemployed workers, and 90.6 million folks are not in the labor force. This exercise gives you an immediate reinforcement and application of the concepts on the previous slide. So if you need to rewind a little bit and see again how you calculate that, that's fine. It should prepare you for some of the kinds of questions you're going to see on your exam. And it also gives you a sense of the actual magnitude of these statistics in the U.S. in recent years. So again, this data is coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So let's take a look. Well, here are your answers. To get labor force, you simply add the employed plus the unemployed, and you get 144.3 plus 11.3, and you get 155.6. So you have 155.6 million workers in the labor force. That's the employed plus the unemployed. Doesn't include the folks who don't want to work. The unemployment rate is simply the number of unemployed divided by the labor force multiplied by 100 for a percentage term, so you can get a whole percentage term here. There are 11.3 million workers unemployed, and there's 155.6 total number of workers in the labor force. You would get 0.073 if you didn't multiply by 100. So if you multiply by 100, you get 7.3%. So you could get slight differences due to rounding errors, but in this example, the unemployed divided by labor force times 100 is 7.3%. So population, what's our population? Well, that's our labor force, which is the employed and the unemployed, plus the folks that are not in the labor force. So your labor force plus those not in the labor force, that's 155.6 plus 90.6. You get 246.2 million people, adult people, again, adults, 16 and up in the population. Now, the labor force participation rate, it's abbreviated here, this is labor force participation rate, is simply your labor force over your total population times 100. So you have that labor force of 155.6 over that total population from up here, 246.2, multiplied by 100, you get 63.2%. It's as simple as that. Now, looking at labor force statistics from different groups, the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, publishes these statistics for demographic groups within the population. So you can look at labor force participation, unemployment, and so on and so forth across many different demographics. These data reveal widely different labor market experiences for different groups. So let's take a look. You can break people down by, say, white and black. You can break them down by male and female. And you can see the unemployment rates by different demographics. Within either racial group, males have a higher participation rate than females. Blacks have a far higher unemployment rate than whites. This is a great concern to many economists and policymakers when we talk about issues of racial harmony and equity. This is concerning. So this is as recent, it's September 2013. So I mean, these aren't old figures. So we're looking at adults in these statistics of 20 years and older. And generally, BLS would be 16 and up. So we see white males have a higher participation rate than females. Black males, higher participation rate in the workforce than black females. And then we look at unemployment rates across not only male and female, but also demographic. And we see an alarming trend here where black males and females have a higher rate of unemployment. Now, as one would expect, teens have lower participation rates and higher unemployment rates than adults. What is striking, so this stats here, what they did is they did 20 and up, and then they looked at teenage workers, like your folks working while they're in high school, that type of thing. Teens have lower participation rates and higher unemployment rates than adults. What is striking, though, are racial disparities. The proportion of white teens in their labor force getting skills and experience that will help them later as adult job market participants is far higher than black teen participation. And the unemployment rate for black teens is far higher than for white teens. So again, the trend of equity concerns continue. Now, compared to the national average, the unemployment is higher for Hispanics and lower for Asians. The participation rates of these groups are similar to those of the national average, but you should know that Asian is the only demographic group for which seasonally adjusted data was not available in this data set. So figures for all the other groups are seasonally adjusted. By seasonal adjustment means like a lot of teenagers could get, or well, a lot of people in general could get a lot more jobs around, say, the holidays when stores are looking to hire more people, when UPS is looking to hire more people to help with the increased volume of packages around Christmas. So that would be an example of adjusting for seasonal adjustments. So some employment's cyclical. So there can be times where it swings up and times where it swings down. What this data is trying to do is control for that. But it's just interesting that you can take the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at it from male, female, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and take a look and see if there's some disparities between groups. Now, these statistics, which are not in the textbook, are particularly interesting probably to college students. It shouldn't be surprising that educational attainment is positively related to labor force participation. For most people, the prospect of better jobs is a key reason for investing in education. So go to school to get a better job, right? Now, you may be especially happy to learn that by getting your degree. In this example, we're using here as a bachelor's degree. You reduce your chances of becoming unemployed by more than half. So compared to people with only just a high school diploma, and by about half the people compared that won't finish college, by getting a bachelor's degree, your chance of unemployment rate really goes down. As you can see, the more education you get here, the unemployment rate goes down, and your labor force participation rate goes up. Basically means you're more marketable. You have more discernible skills in the market. Even in a tough market, people want to hire you. So that's a good thing. Now, here's an interesting thing. Looking at labor force participation rates by sex from 1950 to 2012. Now, think about the stereotypes that have changed in terms of women workers in the market from 1950 to more recent times. The male labor force participation rate is in a percentage of all males. Similarly, the same thing with females. Now, the vertical axis starts at 20 rather than 0 to make the trends more apparent. It's just easier to see the lines in this scale. Since 1950, the female participation has nearly doubled from 34% up to 60%, and male participation rate has declined from 86% to 73%. So what are the factors do you think have caused these trends? The textbook takes a look at some explanations in the case study entitled Labor Force Participation of Men and Women in the U.S. Economy. What are some of the effects and consequences of these trends? Well, that's the same thing you'll see in the text. Well, we know from 1950 to more present day, there would be an upward trend in female participation in the market because, well, the roles of females in society have changed. They've been seen far more equally in the 2000s than they were in the 1950s. So there's been an upward trend in the market. Also, the male trend is pretty flat. There is a slight negative here from 86% to 73%. Perhaps more males are finding out it's okay to stay home with kids. Plus, you have females coming into the market taking more jobs, so it would make sense that perhaps males were taking less jobs. So they have to come from somewhere. Now, there has been job growth over this time to supplicate both of them. However, when there's such an astronomical increase in females, perhaps there's a slight increase in males, and that would make sense. Now, take a look at our second active learning activity. There's limitations to the unemployment rate. In each of the following, what happens to the unemployment rate? Does the unemployment rate give an accurate impression of what's happening in the labor market? So let's take a look at 3 scenarios. The first one's part A. Sue lost her job and begins looking for a new one. Okay. Scenario B. John, a steel worker who has been out of work since his mill closed last year, becomes discouraged and gives up looking for work. He's a discouraged worker. And then example C, Sam, the sole earner in his family of 5, just lost his $80,000 job as a research scientist. Immediately, he takes a part-time job at McDonald's until he can find another job in his field. The objective of this exercise is to lead you to discover why the unemployment rate is not a perfect indicator of joblessness. There's a lot of things going on here. So let's take a look. Here's the first set of our answers on part A. Sue lost her job but begins looking for a new one. This is clear that unemployment rate would rise. She's someone who wants to work, okay, and she doesn't have a job, but she wants one. So she is definitely unemployed. A rising unemployment rate gives the impression that the labor market is worsening, and it is. When Sue lost her job, it's worsening. Now, let's look at B. John has been out of work since last year. He becomes discouraged and stops looking for work. Well, this introduces the term discouraged workers. Discouraged workers would like to work, but have given up looking for jobs. They're not actively seeking jobs. They're just discouraged. This is classified technically as not in the labor force rather than unemployed. The unemployment rate falls because John is no longer counted as unemployed. So he's dropped out of the labor force. He's no longer in those first 2 groups of employed versus unemployed. So the unemployment rate actually goes down. A falling unemployment rate gives the impression that the labor market is improving. However, it's not. John didn't leave on his own. He left because he was discouraged. Let's look at the third example, Sam, part C. Sam lost his $80,000 a year job and takes a part-time job at McDonald's until he finds a better one. The unemployment rate changed because the person, or excuse me, unemployment rate is unchanged because a person is quote unquote employed whether they work full time or part time. They're in the labor force and they have a job. However, things are much worse for Sam. He had an $80,000 job. Now he's working part time at McDonald's. So the unemployment rate fails to show what's really going on here. So there's some limitations. Now, what does the unemployment rate really measure? The unemployment rate is not a perfect indicator of joblessness or the health of a labor market. It excludes discouraged workers, like the steel worker we were talking about, and it does not distinguish between full and part-time work, think of Sam, or people working part-time because full-time jobs are not available, i.e. at McDonald's. Some people misreport their work status to the Bureau of Labor Statistics survey as well. Those 60,000 households, some people, well, they lie. Perhaps they're embarrassed, perhaps they don't want to tell the truth. Despite these issues, the unemployment rate is still a very useful barometer of the labor market and economy. Okay, it can give you an indication of where things are heading. Now, the duration of unemployment. Most spells of unemployment are short. Okay, typically 1/3 of the unemployed have been unemployed for under 5 weeks. 2/3 have been unemployed for under 14 weeks. And only 20% have been unemployed for over 6 months. Okay, so as the unemployment stretches out, less and less people are generally unemployed. So it's more of a short-term issue. Yet most observed unemployment is long-term. Okay, most observed unemployment is long-term. There's a small group of long-term unemployed persons that has fairly little turnover, so it accounts for most of the unemployment observed over time. Okay. Now, the data under the first bullet point came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics via the Employment Situation Survey. Now, some of you may think the two facts on this slide contradict each other. The book gives a simple example that helps you understand how these facts can both be true. These facts imply that economists and policymakers must be careful by interpreting data on unemployment and designing policies to help the unemployed. Okay? While most spells of unemployment are short, typically 1/3 of the unemployed or have only lost their jobs within the last 5 weeks, so within a month or so. Okay, and then really only 20% of them are still unemployed within 6 months. Yet the quote-unquote observed unemployment is long-term. So knowing these facts help policymakers design better policies to help the unemployed. So for the most part, if you become unemployed, it's typically a short-run problem. Yet the unemployment rate likes to look at it in terms of long term because we do these surveys every now and then. It makes unemployment seem a little bit longer. Okay. Now, there's a couple reasons behind this. Well, first one is cyclical unemployment and the natural rate of unemployment. So we look at them compared here. There's always some unemployment. That's what makes it look long term. Though the unemployment rate itself fluctuates from year to year. Now, the natural rate of unemployment is the normal rate of unemployment around which the actual unemployment rate fluctuates. That's a little more confusing than it needs to be. What you need to know is when the job market is in equilibrium, okay, the folks that are left over that still want a job, okay, that is the natural rate of unemployment. Just remember it that way. Now, cyclical unemployment is the deviation of the unemployment from its natural rate. Okay, unemployment, if you can think about unemployment, would have a lot of variation, up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay, natural rate of unemployment is pretty consistent, pretty much a straight line, so it doesn't bounce up and down. All right, the cyclical unemployment is that deviation from the natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so imagine, if you would, a graph that had an axis right here. That would be the percent of people unemployed, and then had an axis running across horizontally would be time. You would see a curve of unemployment that did just like my cursor is doing here, up and down, up and down. Natural rate of unemployment would be people that are just coming and going, transitioning in and out of the labor force. Okay, it would be pretty flat. Well, these, you put the two together, the flat natural rate of unemployment and then the unemployment rate. Okay, as these ziggly lines, we're going to show it on the next slide. The deviations from the natural rate of unemployment up to the cyclical increases in unemployment is cyclical unemployment. It's the deviation from of unemployment from its natural rate, and it's associated with business cycles, which we'll study in later chapters. So there's some ups and downs in the market. So unemployment, bottom line is unemployment is a serious and complicated problem for a variety of reasons. To most effectively address each problem, we need to break down and look at each cause separately. So we're going to begin by noting that the causes of short-run fluctuations in unemployment are different from the causes of the long-run average unemployment rate, which is called the natural rate of unemployment. So in the long run, the job market's in equilibrium, and the folks still looking for a job at that point is what's known as the natural rate of unemployment. So let's take a look at the next slide, which looks at U.S. data on both from 1960. So here we go. See this more steady line, this blue line here? That's your natural rate of unemployment. See your unemployment rate? Boom, boom, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. These deviations, say between this point with my cursor up to this point, that's cyclical unemployment. From this point down to there, that's cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment, the up and down, the deviations from the blue line to the red line. Huge deviation right here, okay? That's cyclical unemployment, right, from here to here. Right. Cyclical unemployment is the gap between the two lines, and in recessions, the actual unemployment rate is higher than the natural rate. The cyclical unemployment is positive. In booms, unemployment is below the natural rate, and cyclical unemployment is negative. So you obviously would prefer it to be negative, but we know it varies over time. So hopefully that's helpful. So your deviations from, say, the blue line to the red, up to the red line is your cyclical unemployment. This would be a positive cyclical unemployment, and from this point to that point be a negative cyclical unemployment. Now, let's explain the natural rate as an overview. So even when the economy is doing well, there's always some unemployment. These include frictional unemployment and structural unemployment. Frictional unemployment occurs when workers spend time searching for jobs that best suit their skills and tastes. Short term for most workers. So this is that thing we were talking about. Most of this unemployment is short term. However, if you have a very specific skill set, like say you're a CPA or you have some sort of specific forensic accounting experience, it's going to take you some time to find the exact job you're going to want. So that's frictional unemployment. It occurs when workers spend time searching for jobs that best suit their skills and tastes. Now, structural unemployment occurs when there are fewer jobs than workers. And this is more usually long term. This is a far more reaching economic problem when people want a job and can't find it. Okay?